Welcome back, patrons. Welcome to the second video of Patreon. I'm going to be putting handle scales on this knife I finished in the first video. Just one of them. I want to focus on this one, and I'm going to be using wenge for the handle scales. So first thing we want to do is make sure that the handle scales fit inside. Maybe that's obvious, but make sure it fits inside your handle scales. So make sure the tang fits inside the handle scales. And then once you've made sure of that, then you go back in and you draw a line across, because there is a point where this bolster goes across, and so you want to make sure that that angle is transferred onto the wood. So you want to make sure that it's transferred on the wood and then match it on both sides. So that's what we're going to do first, and then we'll worry about curving that inside corner, just to make sure it fits up properly. Okay, so I've now taken these scales and I've ground the tops of them so that they fit at the same angle as the bolster. You see it comes up and meets, and everything fits inside the tang. I mean, the tang fits inside the scale. I am going to now focus on radiusing this curve, making this curve fit right into that bolster, and the same thing with the other scale. So it should look like that. So those will fit right up into that after I'm done. And all I'm going to do, I'm not going to trace anything, I'm just going to grind the corner and just start radiusing it until it looks right, basically. So at this point I have just eyeballed it, I've brought in that curve so it sort of nests in there a little bit. Now I'm going to look at it in the light and see what is touching between the bolster and the curve that I've just made. So I want to look at that in the light, look through and see what's touching, and it looks right now like this is touching right here. So I'm going to go back and I'm hit it on the grinder, and I'm going to look at it again and make sure, see how close I've gotten it since. So I'm going to keep going back and forth and doing that until this fits up really nicely. So that's really as simple as it is. I just went in and I ground the places that looked like they were touching on the inside of that bolster, and I just ground them until the whole thing fit up fairly nicely. You can see it. So you can see that's pretty nicely fit up right there. There's no real cracks or crevices in between the bolster and the wood, and it is ready to have holes drilled. But I'm going to go ahead and do the next one. Alright, so I wanted to clear this up a little bit. I know that it sounds like I'm oversimplifying it, but it's really not that difficult. you really just want to grind this corner off. You know, you're just grinding this corner off, and then you radius the whole thing into that corner, just like that. So that's what you're looking for right there, that curve. And so after you've roughed in that curve, you come in here and you look at it in the light. So you look at it so that light will pass through into your eye. You know, you look at it straight on, like that. And you look to see if there's any light coming through this side over to this side. And if there is, maybe it looks like this. Alright? That means you need to grind a little more up here to make it fit this radius. So if I scoot that up, it'll look more like this. And there'll still be a tiny little gap in there. Alright? So maybe you do a little more. You do that, and then all of a sudden it's the right radius. It fits right up in there. It looks, you know, it looks like that. It just looks like that. And then maybe there's tiny little gaps. But you're not trying to make it perfect. You're never going to be able to make it perfect. You're not a machine. Your human eye will never be able to make it so perfect that you can't, you know. So the goal is just to make it as close as you can get it without leaving a little glue line. You want to make it as close as you can get it. And so don't leave a giant gap in there. Don't let a giant gap be left in here right where the bolster is, but do your best to make it as close to this curve as you can. Alright, so now that I have fit up these scales to the bolster, I'm going to go ahead and outline the tang and grind the scales to shape so that it fits right in there. And when I go to drill the holes, they'll be in one place. That's how I do it. Go ahead and grind them to shape. That way when I glue the whole thing up, it doesn't take much for me to get to the tang, down to the tang. I already know the shape of my handle, you know. I'm not looking for the shape of my handle when I'm grinding. I'm not grinding into a big block and hoping I get the right shape. So that's what I like to do. Like getting the outline and then grinding it to shape. So that's what I'll do. Alright, now that I have a set of scales that fit onto my tang, I want to go ahead and get the holes drilled. So the first thing I do with that is I get I use Gorilla super glue. It's just the brand I like. And you can use whatever you want, whatever super glue. This is a little more gel-like. It's a little less fluid. So I'm just going to put a couple dots on the tang, just one dot here and one dot here, and I'm going to let the scale dry. I'm going to let one scale dry on and just be on there, and then I'll drill through those holes. Then I'll put the next scale on, a couple dots of super glue, and I'll drill through the holes I've already drilled. So that way I know that a pin will go all the way through. Okay, so I've got everything done. I just need to clean up the tang with 36 so the glue has something really grippy to hold on to. So I'm going to do that and put a fuller in it, and do the same thing with the bottoms of the scales, and just put a fuller right in the center. That'll get rid of those super glue dots, and it'll be ready to glue up. And then I'll show you guys what I do for the pins. It's very simple. I'll just show you how I set up for peened pins. Alright, so now I've got everything fit up, ready for glue, and I've got the pins fit into the holes. Just like that. Alright, clip it. And since I'm doing peened pins, I want to clip it just a little bit above where I need it so I can pull them out. That's what I do. I pull them out during glue up. After the glue is set a little bit. You don't want to pull them out too soon or else the scales will move. You don't want to pull them out too late either, because then they'll stick to the glue. So then there's another thing I do to make sure the pins don't really stick when I'm doing peened pins. So everything looks good. Everything looks tight. So now it is ready to glue up and prep for handle shaping and pin peening, which will be in the next video. So I'm going to go ahead and get this glued up. I'll show you my process for that. Not super complicated, but when you do it right, it shouldn't be messy, or it should be minimal mess. So I'll show you that real quick. So when I do this, I've already finished my blade. I don't want to have to refinish it. So I take a piece of paper towel. I just do that. Because it's a small blade, I don't need a lot of paper towel. And I take tape. Just use electrical tape. And I wrap it around. Like so. Cover up the tip. Just cover up the whole blade finish. And then you can take termination and flag it. So it'll be easy to, well, since it's paper towel, I don't need to do that. Anyway, that should just slide off after I'm done, and it should keep the finish on the blade nice. So now I'm going to take this apart and glue it all together. And I'm using 5-minute 2-part epoxy. I've taped it up so I don't lose one half. And so that I can just do that and then flip it around and do the other one. So I always use Loctite 5-minute epoxy. That's what I use. It's what I like. I don't have to wait a long time. It's more like 15-minute epoxy. But okay, so for this glue up, you're gonna want Vaseline. I'll show you why in a little bit. Both tangs are ready to be glued. You want a popsicle stick or some sort of mixing stick. I use these little gardening posts, whatever you want to call those. And some wood dust. I'm using brown. like this is probably black wood, but it's just some sort of brown wood dust. If your scales are brown, you want brown wood dust. You want your pins ready to go, and that should be it. And a place to mix your glue. So I use this big piece of steel. That way I can just grind it clean whenever. And your 5-minute epoxy. You should also have some clamps ready. So 2 nice big C clamps. Make sure it's nice and tight. This is the sort of mix that I use, even mix. 1/2, the other half, and then I stir in the wood. So then you just take your first scale, go ahead and get glue nicely covered over the whole thing. So make sure you cover the whole scale with glue. Get it up on top of the curve. Sorry for the noise in the background. Sharing the shop today with Jason. You may want to wear gloves for this. Most of the time I do, but if it's just one knife, I'll just clean my hands off really well afterwards. So both scales are glued. There's no big rush. I'm not rushing to do anything. I just take my pins and I take Vaseline and I stick the pins down into the Vaseline because I'm going to want to take them out afterwards. The Vaseline keeps the pins from sticking. And I'll do it again in a little bit. Want to get it through one side. And then stick the other scale just like that. Lightly tap it. You shouldn't have to really hammer it. You shouldn't have to really hammer it. You just want to lightly tap. Okay. So that's all we're going to do, and then we're going to tighten her up. That's it. So now we just wait for it to glue up, and about halfway through the drying process I'll pull these pins out. Alright, so it's all glued up. I've pulled the pins out, and now I'm just going to go ahead and rough grind and get it all profiled and flatten these out so you can see the fit up on the bolster. So that's what it looks like after glue up. It's nice and solid. You want to give it enough time that it dries really solid, and it's not going to move after you grind it. So as you can see, I've got a nice clean fit up on this bolster. There's no big glue lines all the way down. It's nice and clean all the way down to the end of the tang, and it's tapered as well. It's not all that complicated. What's important is that you get that radius as close as you can get it to the radius of the bolster, and that you get the rest of the tang nice and flat. And when you glue it, make sure you get those clamps on there tight, and before you do any gluing, make sure you rough up the tang, and it still needs to be flat, but rough up the tang, put a fuller in it, put a fuller underneath the scales, everything you can do to make that glue stick really well. So those are really important things. That's a nice even fit up on that. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope that helped. Focusing on that clean fit up on the bolster and on the tang, the gluing, all of that, I think is enough to focus on for one video. And I hope I explained everything well. If I didn't, if you still have questions, let me know. I really want to try and help explain and help you guys learn how to do this. That's what it's for. You guys can contact me directly, and I will always answer my patrons. So thank you so much, guys. On the next video, I will be shaping and doing the pin peening, and I'm not sure yet, but I might do some carving, and I'll show you that too. I just got into carving. I'm really excited about it, so I might start doing that. But we'll see. All right. Thanks so much, guys. See you in the next video.